Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jake Steinberg, and I am your host today for a conversation about craft and video games criticism. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do for this panel, I thought, too often online in our spheres, when people talk about games criticism, I think the focus is on how unstable the field can be, how little it is valued, and all of that is true. But today, I think we're choosing to center something else. I want to center the joy of craft. I want to talk about how games criticism can be personally and professionally fulfilling, and how it can be the act can be kind of a salve for the soul. And I think why it's worth celebrating as an art form in its own right. So first off, I do want to say that this event is part of the work of the New York Video Game Critics Circle, which is a nonprofit dedicated to uplifting underserved communities through the power of video games, through mentorship, free classes, scholarships, career guidance. The circle helps young people break into the games industry, and at the heart of that mission is Playing with Purpose, a writing program that teaches journalism, storytelling, and critical thinking through games, helping the next generation level up their skills, their voices, and their futures. You can learn more at NewYorkGameCritics.com and support the program at the link that is on your screens right now on this beautiful layout. And with that, let's get started. Let's jump right in, baby. Take a little sip if you got a drink. We're getting comfy now. It's my pleasure to introduce some of the sharpest minds in games criticism today, or as the YouTube comments like to call them, paid shills who hate fun. They are here. First, I would like everybody here to introduce themselves, their title, what it is that they do. Moises, let's start with you.
Somehow I knew you were going to start with me.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Moises. I don't have a title.
Good.
I'm a freelance writer, kind of just around town. I guess mostly what I do now is I'm a columnist over at Endless Mode, which is the new games vertical that spun off from Paste Magazine and Paste Games. Yeah, you can catch me rambling there every Tuesday, if all things go according to plan. Besides that, I also work at GameSpot a little bit recently. And yeah, I'm just a freelancer around town.
And Moises, I want everybody to answer this question, but I desire your answer first.
Okay.
What game? I need you to name a game for me that made an impact on you this year. And I want the bumper sticker statement of what it was. So everybody kind of think about this for a second. I'll give you an example from my own life first. For me, Donkey Kong Bonanza, specifically Turf Surf. I've been thinking about this. This act of pulling up the ground and then using it as a surfboard to move. I think people don't realize this yet, but we will refer to that act forever as turf surfing. That is now the term of art in the video games. That this will come up for decades into the future. People will talk about turf surfing. Okay, because of Donkey Kong Bonanza, it made an impact on me. I think about this a lot. So Moises, in a game you played this year, didn't have to come out this year, but what was something that it hit you?
I mean, probably my favorite game of the year is Despelote.
Okay.
Which I was actually lucky enough to review under the stewardship of one of my panelists here, Gio. And what I need to say, what stuck out about it to me personally?
Yeah, give me the bumper sticker of what hit you. When did you know? When did it hit you and you went, "Oh, this is okay, something's happening to me"?
I think I knew right away. Like,
whoa,
it is the first and only game I think that has really made me feel. And this is a corny term to use, but I'm going to use it right now, and this is the only time I'm ever going to use it. I felt like actually seen. I think I have been grasping for straws, trying to find like visibility for somebody like myself in games, and I think I've had examples that were close, but Julian, the main character, and like his family felt honestly reflective of myself and my own family growing up. Awesome. And it is why it's probably the most personal game that I have ever played.
Thank you for sharing that, Moises. And I do want to share with everybody on the stream before we get to our next panelist that we have had 2 donations come in from Ken Shepard and Jake and Bacon. Ken with 110 bones, Jake and Bacon with 10. And a little surprise for you all. Every time I see a new donation come in that is $10 or above, I will be sniping at one of you. And I will say, give me a 1 through 10 score of this video game character. Okay? A 1 through 10 score of this video game character. And we're gonna go to Gio next. So Gio, right off the top, I have a video game character for you, and I need you to score them 1 through 10.
Okay.
Captain Toad.
Oh, Captain Toad, a good boy and a good friend, better than Mario.
Yeah.
We like Captain Toad better than Mario here, folks. That's like an 8 out of 10 boy. He's so
8 out of
sweet.
10?
Yeah, what more do you want from a character? I was thinking about Captain Toad literally like 2 days ago, and I was like, wow, you ever just think about Captain Toad? What a delightful sense of adventure on that friend.
It doesn't bother you that he can't jump. He cannot jump.
That's great. No, I can't.
Okay,
I'm not good at jumping.
Many of us can't, Jake.
I'm just listen. I just wanted to know. Okay, now Gio, thank you for that. Please introduce yourself, and of course, regale us with a game that impacted you and how.
Oh my gosh. Well, Moises stole the good one. Hi, I'm Giovanni Colantonio.
Yes.
I am editor at large over at Polygon. And I don't know. This year has been such a strange one for me. I was gonna say Despelote, because that's really the game that y'all gotta play if you haven't played it yet. That one's the real game of the year for sickos.
Yeah.
Not for sickos. That's just the real game of the year. There's no sicko about it. I actually was very affected by Avowed this year, which I was very surprised by, because I think when I first saw that game, I was like, nah, there's no way, there's no chance. But just the way that game is like very nuanced as a kind of post-pandemic meditation, and when you really start to get into it and what it's kind of doing to deal with kind of like the intersection of fascism and crisis, and the way that story kind of tells that, really, I thought was very mature for video games of that scale. But even beyond that, just like mature for a lot of like post-pandemic stuff that I've seen, where so much of it is focused on like being inside was hard, like, oh, that was tough. And that game really, for it to kind of go into the depth of like, hey, how can horrible times be manipulated for political gain? I was like, man, that's such a cool thing that no one's talked about yet. And it's just a great game. That thing plays so well. Beyond that, I love that game. That's shockingly high on my list right now for the year.
Gio, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for that introduction. We've got another, from an anonymous source, another $25 donation, which means, Carolyn, before you introduce yourself, I'm going to need a 1 through 10 score on this video game character. Shadow the Hedgehog.
Man, okay. I am not a Sonic person, so I do not come to this with like my impression is just like angst, love, like an admirable angst, admirable like teen angst. So they got Keanu to voice him in the new movie. And I do think Keanu is like one of our most soulful and interesting actors. And I think that is biasing like me more like to see Shadow in a new light. I'm going to go, but I also think angst can be kind of tiresome in one note. I'm going to go 6. I'm going to go 6 on this.
Wow. Captain Toad, 2 points higher than Shadow the Hedgehog. Tell the world. Okay. Now, Carolyn, please, thank you so much for that. Please introduce yourself to our audience and talk to me about a game that impacted you.
Yeah, so I'm Carolyn Petit. I am a managing editor at Kotaku. I'm a veteran games critic and writer. And like I would say, and I think this kind of feeds well into our overarching topic, a game this year that really kind of shook me up was Death Stranding 2. And part of the reason why it shook me up is that I found it to be a game of simultaneously remarkable highs and terrible lows. And I think often in games criticism, mainstream games criticism at least, a lot of what we see kind of tends to like flatten games or be afraid of that kind of complexity or internally contradictory, really engaging with that. Like, how do you score a game that at its best moments is, transcendent, in some ways, and at its worst is like some of the most, for me personally, kind of just like reductive, like gender essentialist kind of nonsense you can imagine. Like it's tough, right? But I think part of what I love about the kind of criticism that I admire and strive to do and champion is that it allows for like taking a game on as in its entirety and acknowledging that our experience of something can be in some ways transcendently beautiful, may give us imagery or have some quality that will really move us or stir us and stay with us, while at the same time there are maybe other aspects that we're like, that is some straight up garbage right there.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I am so delighted to share that another $25 donation has come through from Mara3G, which means I get to hit my last panelist over here with a review. And the next on my list is, of course, Goofy as seen in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. 1 through 10, please, Moises.
Goofy as seen in the Kingdom Hearts.
As seen in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, with the shield, with the hat.
I think there's never been a more reliable guy.
You meant Captain Toad?
Yes, I have. And you know what? I think Captain Toad is a bit of a schmuck compared to Goofy. I'm just going to say it. I mean, Goofy took a whole rock boulder
That's
pebble
true.
to
That's
the
true.
head. He like died and came back. Like, can Captain Toad say that he's done that? Captain Toad can't even jump. I know I was coming to his defense earlier, but the guy can't even jump.
Well, you turned on Captain Toad. What's going on?
That's what makes his adventurous spirit so endearing. He still goes out there and does what he does.
Exactly.
Yes.
What's the score, Moises? What's the number?
We need a number.
Goofy is a 10 out of 10.
Oh.
Our
Goofy's
first 10 out of 10.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I am glad that we started this way so that we could prove to the viewers that this is, in fact, these are the sharpest minds in games criticism today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing these scores. We, of course, have Goofy at 10, Captain Toad at 8, and Shadow the Hedgehog at 6. That's where we're at right now.
All is as it should be.
Exactly.
Wild.
Fantastic work. Gorsh. All right, guys. All right, everybody. So thank you all for joining. Thank you so much for being here. And I've got a few questions here. And I just thought that this could be a little sigh of relief, a little unclenching of the shoulders, just talking about why we love doing this stuff. Because again, with all the stuff that's out there about working in games and games criticism, I think sometimes it can just feel like this thing that constantly has a bit of a weight attached to it. There's always something in the back of our heads that feels a little uneasy, a little dangerous. And sometimes I think having these conversations can be a good way to like remind ourselves about how much we love this stuff and how fulfilling it can be. So, Gio, I'd love to start with you.
Sure.
When you sit down to write about a game, where do you start? Do you start with emotion, mechanics, theme of the game, something else? Kind of what is your, I figure a lot of people that are involved with the New York Video Games Critics Circle might have aspirations of getting into this themselves. And I think just like, you've got that empty page in front of you, you've just spent however many hours in a game. What's your go-to, your starting point?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question because like it really varies from game to game, because I think like the one thing that's true about games is that like there's no, like they can do totally different things, right? So there are some times where like I want to come to a game and I am like, this is a game that is, maybe narrative driven in a really explicit way, and I really want to engage with that story and how it's telling it to me and how gameplay is reinforcing that. Sometimes it's just like this piece of interactivity is just interesting, right? And like the way that people are thinking about play and thinking about like how you can mess with it, like those kind of more experimental things. I'm kind of like that's a whole different thing, right? I think you see that in a lot of like like a cute platformer, right? That is like really just based on the joy of movements, right? That's not necessarily narrative driven necessarily, but I do think that my like thing that I come back to with any game is kind of like I am of the firm belief that every game communicates something, whether it is something that is like a capital T theme, or it's just, again, like the joy of movement. Like that is communicating something, right? A Mario game communicates just as much as The Last of Us, where it can be like, hey, like this Mario game is about like the joy of travel and going to like these locations and soaking them in and learning them. And that's that's something. So I'm always looking for that. I guess when I start in a game, I'm always like immediately trying to figure out like what is this game telling me, whether that's through writing. That's the easiest way to find it, right? But I'm almost more interested in like, no, but what does it tell me through play, right? What does it tell me through interactivity?
Mhm.
How do those things communicate? That's usually kind of like where I start at as an overall thing. But again, the way you get into that is so different depending on what the game is, and it can really change. But yeah, that's kind of like the first thing that I try to figure out in a game is sort of like, what do you want to tell me? Whether it's big or small, what do you want to tell me?
And Gio, I love that answer because, I think video games are a storytelling medium. And every game then is trying to communicate with you. It is trying to tell you something. And if we think of criticism as the process through which we imaginatively discourse with a work, half of that is, what's the thing saying to us? And then what are we saying to the game? That conversation kind of starting with what is that meaning created between me and the work? I think that is so helpful. And I think as we kind of start talking more about criticism and craft here, Carolyn, I think you might be well positioned to answer this question. How do you distinguish review from criticism in video games? And then maybe like how do they serve different purposes to you?
So I mean, this is sort of one of my soapboxes, and like I'm not going to say that I have the one right answer to this.
Of
right?
course. Of course.
But and I understand why the notion of review as kind of just product evaluation, consumer advocacy took such deep root in let's say mainstream gaming websites, the mainstream gaming space. Like, yeah, I mean, at one point, like, in the 90s, early 2000s, you really did want to know, like, are the controls in this game just totally busted? Like, that was so important. And it's still, like, obviously a game review should still engage with, like, does it function okay in my view? But, like, okay, real quick kind of origin story for me as a critic, or a foundational thing. In my late teens, early 20s, I was living in LA. LA had an amazing weekly publication called the LA Weekly, and I'd always read their movie reviews. And they had this one critic named Manola Dargis, who is still a film critic today. She writes for the New York Times, and something about reading her reviews, like film reviews, like galvanized something. It kind of electrified something in my brain, because I was so aware that I was used to reviews that I think kind of even in film, where the critic was kind of imagining a kind of just a general like audience goer, or let's say a general just player, and asking themselves like, what would their experience of this be, and kind of trying to take themselves out of it in a way as much as possible. What it was so apparent for me, or one of the things in Miss Dargis's writing, was that she had her like own well-informed, well-established ethics about cinema, what's valuable, what's not. And she would bring her intellect and her emotions and everything to bear. And so reading her was kind of like, in some ways, because I didn't always agree with her, but I always got something out of what she wrote that then informed and enriched my experience of a film, even if I totally disagreed with her, because it was like, reading her could be like taking a cold shower sometimes, because it was like immersing myself in someone else's perspective. I believe that even a review of a game, yes, while doing, giving readers a sense of what the game is, how it plays, should ideally be criticism as well, in the sense that it should reflect the ethic and the values of the individual experience of the reader. Like, I am always going to get more out of a game review where I know that it's, Moises has brought, himself to bear on his experience of Despelote, for instance, or, whatever it is that I am, because then it's like this, then it's the conversation between the game, Moises as a player, and then like his experience. Then I get to take that when I play Despelote to my experience of it. And whether I agree with Moises or not, having his perspective and his insight rattling around in my brain is gonna it's gonna change for the better. Like even if I come away from the game, disliking it or whatever, my experience of it and my understanding of why I disliked it or whatever will be enriched because I have some other thoughtful players, communicated experience of it, inside me through their criticism.
Definitely. I think something that I was listening to Gita Jackson talk about this recently, how in criticism, in allowing you to understand one perspective, even if somebody reading your criticism disagrees with it, that's good. They're engaging with the thing that you wrote.
Yeah. And I think, I want to say that I think one of the, not to get negative, but one of the issues we have in games culture writ large, like online games culture and stuff, is I think a lot of readers have been kind of trained to want a review that reading it is kind of like, you get that warm familiarity and it's just like, hey, so the person starts like, I've been a fan of the Final Fantasy games since I was a teen or whatever. And you're like, me too. And nothing in the review ever kind of you just kind of get exactly what you expect. And it's just this kind of, warm bath of a reading experience. I think a lot of readers are when they come across a review where they encounter the subjectivity of the writer they feel that it's bracing, it's jarring, and sometimes they have a negative reaction and this isn't how you do game reviews, this isn't how you do games criticism. And I think that's one of the big obstacles we have in a way, is because is kind of challenging that perception and making room for criticism that engages with games from different perspectives. I mean, yes, yeah
100%. I think I think teaching an audience what to expect is such a tough thing. When I hear a pop song for the first time, I kind of know how it's going to go. And it's why do I know that? The same reason that when I go to a Marvel movie, I know to stay through the credits. I've been taught how to consume something. So I think when you have a consumer who is clicking on a video game review, you are fighting all of the years and maybe thousands of pieces of media that they have consumed to get to this point where they are clicking on that review now. It's the same reason why when I read a book and I see the word asked or said over and over and over again, it doesn't bother me, because we have been taught that those words are invisible. So you're always fighting expectations and that kind of thing. Now, I do need to cut in here for a second because we had a $10 donation for Zomar, which means I go back to my list of video game characters. I'm going back to Geo here. We're going back to Nintendo. And before I introduce this one, Geo, this character is in a precarious position. This rating could make or break this character's future. I think that right now, your review of this character could send a message to people who have power about whether or not this character is going to be more or less featured in the future. I am, of course, talking about Diddy Kong.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Chibi Robo.
No, Diddy Kong. Diddy Kong. Listen, he's there, but he's not there.
Diddy Kong is second banana for a reason. I'll put it that way. Yay. Diddy Kong's fine. He's fine. He's kind of cool-ish, but no, he's not. He's just Diddy Kong. He's a little guy. I've never had many feelings about Diddy Kong, and especially in Smash. I know he's S tier or whatever, on the charts, right? People will be "Ooh, Diddy Kong's secretly the best." Right. Diddy Kong stinks in Smash. Come on. I'm gonna go. I mean, he can't be higher than Shadow the Hedgehog, so I have to go lower. I'm gonna do 5 out of 10. This is a middle of the road Nintendo character. We got to be critical.
Mad about this? Are you mad about this, Moises?
I'm a little mad about this. I don't know. I've never been a Diddy main in Smash, but I enjoyed him from time to time. I like his little
5's not a bad
shooter.
Right. That is part of what we have to.
Exactly.
But the gamers say otherwise.
Yeah.
Middle of the road. It's not bad.
Let's start using the full range. If we must use scores, come on, y'all. And
I will say something I've always thought suspicious about Diddy Kong is his down special move in Smash. He throws that banana peel. Where's the banana? What's going on with this peel stuff?
He just has a bag of peels.
There's something suspicious about that to me. That I don't know. I've always thought about that. Moises, I liked that we're talking. You introduced this idea of the 5 out of 10. This is not a bad score. I like us talking about we got to explore the range. There was a piece you wrote recently that I recently admired about, I think, like Mario Kart and the end of the world, and kind of talking about finding peace and happiness while all of this stuff is kind of happening around you, and being able to absolve yourself of a lot of exterior pain for the sake of a calm and peaceful moment. And I think what I wanted to ask you in terms of your craft in that piece, which I really admired, is do you ever have a conversation with yourself in terms of balancing writing for clarity and writing for style? And because I find that is something in your work, whether you're aware of this or not, that you balance very well. And I'm just curious if I a lot of these questions are things that I've just always wanted to ask the people on this panel. So I'm asking you, is me saying this, does this bring anything up for you? Yeah.
Yes, this brings up so much.
Great. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I think I try to bring a kind of balance to it. Yeah. And I think this is something that I really wrestled with, especially while I was in college. Because at the same time that I was kind of trying to get my foot in the door of like being in games media and doing games crit, I was simultaneously in college, not in J school, but in a journalism program. And I was helping run like my college newspaper. And so at the same time that I'm like clocking into school and going to lectures where I'm being taught about like objectivity as not like objectivity as like a form, you know, like I feel like when we think of objectivity, we think of like, oh, like the truth, and like you don't really express like an opinion so much as like you are regurgitating like facts. I was in classes that were like, no, objectivity is like a form to construct an argument. And I think I was wrestling with my desire to kind of inject myself into the writing that I was doing, while also being like kind of batted over the head and being told that like the writer expressly cannot be part of the story. And I think this is where a lot of like the new journalism that like seemed to crop up in like the 2010s, like this is like the struggle that they were going through and what birthed the new journalism, which is really like the thing that has influenced me the most. I don't have a prolific history of like being I didn't think growing up that I wanted to write. I didn't think that I wanted to be in media. I grew up wanting to be like every other thing. I wanted to be a cop at one point. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a firefighter. I was going to be a lawyer at some point, a scientist. Like I grew up with like way too many ideas that were not writing. But like I picked up on games media and like specific writers that really resonated with me. I think I tie a lot of like my influences back to the Waypoint crew, the like OG Waypoint crew. Like those guys were really kind of fundamental in shaping what I wanted to do, or what I wanted to read. And then over the course of like my own personal writing and classes and stuff, I think I thought writing was like really laborious when I was taught that I had to construct an argument within these like certain confines and everything. And then the second that I started kind of going like railing against it and injecting more of myself into it, I found writing to be really personally gratifying. I know that a lot of people, and probably this panel agrees with this, but like I see like my writing a lot as like this kind of exorcism of like my feelings and thoughts. Like I get it out of my system, and it feels really cathartic. And it really helped when, and I don't know at what point this really started to happen, but like that writing started to resonate with like my teachers more. which like affirmed that I was doing something right. Even if I wasn't doing it according to the letter, I was doing something right that was resonating with people in some way, shape, or form. I was like affecting the like hearts and minds of people who read my shitty high school essays. And then that kind of kept germinating in the back of my head throughout undergrad. And here I am now. So long story short, yeah, like I've been wrestling with how to balance like myself and like what I've been taught writing needs to be. I think I strike like an okay balance sometimes. Sometimes I also deliberately take on assignments and do them in certain ways. Like not everything that I write is like dredging up a lot of personal feelings. When you have to do this work, I guess especially like as a freelancer, you kind of get used to like the hustle, and like sometimes writing is just work, and that paves the way for the opportunities when writing can be something grander than just work.
Yeah, and I kind of love something you're touching on here, which is I think where I want to go next, kind of where the love and the joy of the work really comes from. And I think about this a lot because I think you know, in the newest Ta-Nehisi Coates book, he talks about how stories have the power not just to introduce you to a fight, but to bring you into one. And he calls this the ecstasy of discovery. And it's like a very specific kind of learning that he kind of feels is cross-cultural and it is kind of like exciting to everyone. And I think we've all kind of had that moment when you're reading a book and something changes in your mind that going forward maybe changes who you are as a person. And I think for me, as somebody who writes about games, one of the ways in which I often think about the joy of what this is I remember being a high schooler and reading Shakespeare, reading Jane Austen, and I would get so frustrated because I would always think to myself, I am a stupid 16-year-old kid. Anything that I want to say about these books has been said by somebody smarter than me and in a better way already. And it was so frustrating. And then I think something that I'm kind of really and obviously now I know that that's not really true, but something that I'm kind of loving about video games as a younger medium is that there is this opportunity to have kind of a truly original take and position and thought about something. Because the space is so young, you can be the first person to really loudly say something. And I think that is kind of powerful in a self-actualizing way as an artist. So Gio, let me ask you, when you've published so many pieces, you've published so many reviews, so many great pieces of games criticism, and I want to know, from working on it at home to, maybe running over to your partner in the middle of a draft saying, I just had a good idea for something, to when you're in the kitchen cooking up a soup, to it finally being posted, you see the final thing, people are sharing it online. When does it hit for you? When do you go, oh, I'm into what is happening here. This is what this is about for me.
It's at so many different points for me. It can really hit at a lot of different times. There are some pieces that I write where like when I come up with the idea, I have that, right? When I have like, this is what I want to talk about in this piece, or when I really feel like I've unraveled something and I'm like, oh, I get it. And I'm seeing the matrix and I have like a whole interpretation and read of this game. Sometimes it hits me there, right? Like before any words are on the page at all. And getting to write about it is more just kind of like, oh, cool. Now I get to put that thought on the paper, but I've like done the hard part in my head in those cases, right? Where I'm like, oh, I feel this thing and it's connecting with me. So sometimes it's that, right? Sometimes it's just before anything, because I always say like, I start writing a review the second I start playing the game, because like my brain is active when I'm playing a game. Like I can't turn it off. I'm like analyzing like live. So by the time I like get to a page, I kind of already know what I'm going to write most of the time, because it's already drafted up here. But then there are just some times where it's like, you have an idea and you're not quite sure about it and you get it on the page and it's after, right? You finish the draft and you're like, oh, this is great and personally fulfilling. And I've definitely written a couple of pieces like that have meant a lot to me, and they haven't like picked up or people maybe haven't like share them around a lot or whatever, but like that doesn't matter to me, right? Because it's like, oh, I feel good about what I've expressed here, and I feel like I've been really clear in that, and I like documenting that stuff for myself. So sometimes there, and then yeah, sometimes it's just when you do something really out there or weird, and people like resonate with it, and you're not sure if they're gonna like resonate with it. You know, I've gotten like, I've gotten really into doing like real experimental swings with some of my reviews. Like I'm in this formalist era where I'm kind of like trying to mess around with like, oh, how do I like communicate what the game feels like through writing, right? And like, how do I like mess with structure to get that across? And like, if a game's funny, I want the piece to be funny. If a game is like really laborious and slow, I kind of want the piece to be laborious and slow. I've like gotten into that a lot, and those are things where like I'm just never sure until people read it, right? And I'm never sure if that gets across or if people really understand what I'm doing. And I think the example I give a lot for something like this is UFO 50 last year. Fantastic game. Love that game. If y'all haven't played it, it's out now on Nintendo Switch. They just dropped it on Switch. It's great. Really great game. And I like wanted to do something really different for that. And I really wanted to kind of like engage with the way that game creates its own fiction and like creates a believable fiction that you want to live in, and creates like a whole world of fictional characters where you're like, oh, these people feel real, and it's like blurring the lines. And I remember like writing a review, and for those who haven't read this, I did like a review that was a send up of old 80s, game reviews, like these short blurbs, very like kind of product reviewy kind of things or whatever. But like wrote them as if they were like from magazines at the time, like from the 80s. And I kind of wrote them into a play. Like you go through the blurbs and there's a story that unfolds, and like the reviewers are characters. And like when I was writing it, I was like, I have no idea if this is anything, and it really took people reading it and like getting what I was trying to like communicate in it, that really like was the gratifying part of that. So yeah, I mean, the answer to that is it's just it can be any time right during that process where it's gratifying. Like sometimes it can be a lot later. Like sometimes I'll just go back and read a piece that I thought was bad and go read it, and I'm like, you know what?
Yes, dude.
This is good.
Yes.
This was good. I was cooking here. So yeah, it's definitely like it can be totally different parts of the process for me, but like I a lot of places where I get that gratification for sure.
And I think what I love so much about that, Gio, is that it resonates so much with what you were talking about earlier about kind of finding that what that meaning of that game is, and then now translating it into your work. And it's so funny. I think like a lot of the stuff that we're already talking about, I'm seeing how it can come to the surface immediately, because with UFO 50, with that amazing piece that you wrote, I know that something that like really stuck out to you was that kind of progression of the in fiction time period, and how it was like from this year to this year, and then this game came out. This is the chronology. And like for me playing UFO 50, what was much more salient was I felt like I was in a bookstore, and it was the experience of seeing, maybe looking at the cover, maybe reading that 2-sentence description and going, oh, not for me. Maybe you jump into a game and you experience the first couple pages and you go, no, not this one. And then it's like, that was I was in this thing as it was, as a container in a completely, so two different interpretations, obviously, just in terms of where the meaning was constructed between us. Yeah.
UFO 50 is like a really great example of what we're talking about in general, because I think it's almost like the joy of criticism and like different perspectives in a nutshell, where like you will talk to people about that game who will tell you that they love completely different things about it. Like they will tell you, I love this game in it, and you can be like, oh, I hate that one. And they're like, what? Like, but it's doing this and it's doing this. And you're like, oh, like, I don't know. I really like what this game is doing. And like the joy of that game since its launch, like a year strong now, like I still talk to people about it, and I'm like, I learned so much. And like, Carolyn, this is like a really great example. Like, I know you love Barbuda in that, right? And
I was just about to go there, Gio. You are taking my job.
No,
I was just about to go there. I was like,
I we all immediately jumped to Barbuda.
Yeah, like I know that you love that game so much, and I remember like the first time I played it, I was like, oh, I like hate this. I can't figure it out. And it took me like your perspective to go like, oh, I get what this game is doing that I missed. And like I still like it's not like one of my favorite games in it personally, but hearing your perspective and being able to be like, oh, like this, I get it now. I see the matrix of this. That's like the joy of that game. And I think that for people who like aren't in the criticism sphere, but have had that experience, like is the gratification of criticism, like from my perspective, where it's like, those micro conversations that you have with people where you're like, oh yeah, oh they found something in this that like I didn't totally grasp.
Right.
That's it. That's the whole experience in one game.
Carolyn, I would love if you could share a little bit about because now having my perspective and Gio's perspective on UFO 50 as a kind of our case study here, I feel like you now have a third completely different perspective on why you loved that game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to have lived through the NES era as it was happening, and I think or even going earlier, like in the Intellivision era, like part of like a formative experience with games for me is kind of like going over to grandma's, and they have an Intellivision and all these games, and I don't know anything about them, and I pop them in maybe one by one, and all of them initially in one way or another are like inscrutable, right? Like I'm like I had and because the Intellivision controller was this chunky thing that had like a keypad thing, and there'd be like all these functions and everything, and so part of my formative experience of games and where the love came from is almost that experience of like I have it's pure discovery. Like from the jump, it's like, what is this? And how is it making meaning? And how do I interact with it? And what is this world? And also like, I mean, this is also an era where games like Pitfall, the cartridge would say, like by Gary Kitchen on it or whatever. And you knew like this came out of the brain of Gary Kitchen. So Barbuda, the little UFO 50, yes, for each game, it has like a tiny little factoid. And the thing for Barbuda is like this, I forget his name, but this employee like worked on this game after hours or something at this, office software company and almost got fired for creating it. So I have this vision of this guy who he has this thing in his brain, and he doesn't want to compromise it. He doesn't want to make it like inviting to players. He wants them to just engage with the raw experience of it as it is. And like, I think a lot of UFO 50 is that. It's that experience of, going to grandma's house, it would be my analogy. And there's, a pile of games there and you don't know what any of them are. But Barbuda was the most like purely distilled example of that, where it's all like discovery and wonder and delving into this mysterious world, and like what are these enemies down here, and what is this this blobby green thing is saying some thing to me, and it's like I know it means something but I don't know what it means. What does it mean? All of that was just for me electrifying as a player. I loved it so much.
I really enjoy whenever there is a game like this that I see people bringing just completely different interpretations to, that I'm like, oh, you're secretly confessing something about yourself to me through the way in which you are interrogating this game. And I find that like these kinds of stories and this kind of criticism really brings me closer to writers that I really admire. It reminds me of there's a James Baldwin quote that if anybody in the chat or whatever has ever been in a class of mine, I pretty much say this every single time, so apologies. But the role of the artist is exactly the same as the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. And that, like, oh man, that to me is one of those that like every time I say that, it hits me every single time. James Baldwin, one of the greats.
Along that line, I want to quickly say, like,
please,
James Baldwin was very critical of a lot about the United States, like, or other, whatever. And so I just, even though we're trying to keep the tenor of this conversation positive, I want to positively champion the value of really negative reviews. Like, I would like, so let me be honest here.
Please.
I think, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like,
I
think it is a terrible game. Like, I think it is top to bottom just a complete artistic failure. It's the way it interprets, the original game, its open world. I just think it's miserable. I think it's just a creative misfire. That's not to say I don't think tremendous amounts of hard work went into it. That's not to say that I think the people who worked on it like did a bad job. I'm just saying that the game itself as it exists, I think is bad. like, it is weird to me, if I go on like Metacritic or something, and I
Yeah.
scan through the reviews for that game, it's like hundreds, 90s, 80s, 80s, 70s, 70s, 60s, maybe like the bottom one is like, I don't know, a 72 or something. And I'm like, I still feel like, where in mainstream games criticism
Mm.
is the real spirited disagreement, the real like room for truly different perspectives? I want to shout out, what I think is a just a very important piece on games criticism. It's by Tevis Thompson. Go to tevisthompson.com, read on game reviews. You may strongly disagree with it. You may, at times, it may make you angry, but I think if nothing else, it will stimulate you, just like a good review will stimulate you about a film or a movie, a film or a game or what have you. It will challenge maybe some of your ideas of what games criticism should be, and I think that's always valuable. Yeah.
You said something about knowing that I wanted to keep the tenor of this conversation positive, and I just want to say, like negative criticism, like harsh criticism, I think uplifting criticism is positive. I think justice is positive.
Yes. And I will say, I think even like a negative review for a game can still uplift games as a medium. Like you are treating games as a medium with respect. You're not treating them with kid gloves. You're not treating them as some fragile thing that we have to whatever. Like, we don't have to do the, Scorsese said he doesn't like Marvel. We don't, whatever. Games can take it. Games are a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. Games can effing take it. I promise you. And yeah, like I just think it uplifts games to bring the full rigor, the full, everything, to bear on them yeah, I mean, if movies can take it, and I've read pans of 28 years later, and I've read raves of it, and like nobody thinks like, well, only one is actually right and the other is wrong, because we kind of understand that cinema is an art form and is like there can be strongly differing opinions upon it. We need to get there with games as well. We need to understand that if somebody out there writes writes a scathing review of some big AAA game and gives it like a 3 out of 10, like video games will be okay. Like take a deep breath. You don't have to and actually maybe see it as yes, a sign of elevating games as a whole, as an art form, as a medium.
I'm hesitant to dive too deeply in some of the directions I know that this conversation could go, knowing that we have 6 minutes left on the clock.
Give us another hour.
I do. Yeah, that's right. Keep it going. Run out the clock. So I do want to remind everybody watching, though, that via the link on screen right now, if they would like to hear more 1 through 10 character reviews from this panel, $10 and up donations. That's what you got to do via the link on your screen right now. You have about 5 minutes left. Just want to remind everybody on that. But as we kind of get closer to the end here, and as we start to wrap things up, before this stream started, I went to my Discord community, who was very excited for this conversation, and I asked them. I was like, "What if there's anything I can ask these people that we admire? What would you want to know the most?" And the most popular question I think that I saw in my Discord was, there are people who kind of crave the kind of criticism that we have been describing here today. And they look at other art forms and the kind of criticism that exists in other mediums, and maybe they are a bit wistful for that kind of work to exist in the world of games. And I think there are, again, not for the amount of time we have, we can't really get into why that is the case right now, but just for somebody who is hungry for a higher level of artistic integrity in their work about games, if you had that person in front of you, what would you tell them to encourage, to look for, to discover, to practice on their own, just to heighten their own sense of being their own sense of video game citizenship? I think I'd like to hear from everybody about this one. So if this is if I just said something and this is calling to you, I like to pick people out because I know it's hard when you're on a call and everybody's jumping in. But please, somebody jump in. Somebody jump in.
I mean, I'll just quickly say, I think one thing that all of the game critics that I admire, have in common is an interest in the arts more broadly, and like they're not just like I'm just a gamer, and they're I think reading well is essential, like reading it just for the kind of thinking and writing, the craft of writing that makes great reviews and great criticism like actually engaging to read. So yeah, but primarily I would say read. I mean, so for me, as folks may have gathered, it's film criticism. I like critics who talk with their whole chest, or whatever the expression is. Who if they think a film is great, they're gonna shout it from the rooftops. If they think it's bad, they will have no hesitation dragging it through the mud. So I'd say Walter Chod, Film Freak Central, read Angelica Jade Bastien, read Jordan Searles. Seek out critics who bring that kind of intellectual and emotional kind of that wholeness of that self and experience to the engagement with the work. I think that's going to be one of the most enriching things you can do as a critic. Excellent. Or as an aspiring critic.
Yeah. Do either of you, Gio and Moises, do you have thoughts on this?
I agree with all of that, especially the bit about like finding people who are broadly interested in the arts outside of games. I mean, Carolyn, you mentioned like being influenced by like Dargis earlier, Magnolia Dargis, and like same, like a lot of my stuff came from that era of like A.O. Scott actually at the New York Times was like a really big one that unlocked it for me. And a lot of the stuff that I bring into games criticism, comes from that. So I definitely think like I agree, like finding people who are thinking about the world outside of the game, I think is a really important thing to find. And it's like you always try and look for that link in games, and sometimes you have something to say and sometimes you don't, and you're like more self-contained within the game, and I think that's fine. I've written solely kind of within the context of the game before. But yeah, I think like whenever you can find critics like that who are kind of like, hey, I'm drawing connections to X, Y, and Z, right? And I'm thinking about the new Mafia game, not just in the context of like, I'm a fan of the Mafia series, but like, hey, Italian history. Like, let's talk about
what is it in conversation with for you?
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me. Like, I always seek out writers who feel like they are, to use your word, like starting conversations, because I think a good review is a conversation starter, right? People always see them as like the end point, like, oh, this writer said their piece and like now it's done. And it's like, no, that's supposed to be the thing at the beginning of the conversation where you take it and you go, oh, I agree with that, and it made me think of this. Or you say, I completely disagree with that, and why do I disagree with that? And then you start to build from there. So I definitely think that like finding those writers who feel like they're trying to start a conversation as opposed to someone who's trying to be like the final word on a thing, and like, oh, I'm going to tell you that it's glitchy, and it's like, okay, cool. I guess there's not much to say more about that. I think is really important. And I think that stuff is in a lot of places and in a lot more places than people give it credit for. There are, you can find it in a lot of different spots, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Moises, in our last minute here, you got something for us?
I agree with the other two about like, places to look for critics. I didn't really grow up reading many critics. I didn't read like newspapers or magazines, alt weeklies, websites all that much. I think what the consistent for me though in my life, like outside of video games, is that I've always kind of had a good circle of people who like enjoyed entertaining conversations about games. Like to like what Gio was kind of saying about how like a piece of games crit should be like the start of a conversation, not the period at the end of it. I largely found people who were kind of willing to like, push and shove like with arguments. It never got like too heated, but like it was always fun talking about video games with other people. explicitly, I think, because my friends didn't ever necessarily feel like they had to agree with me, and I did not feel like I necessarily had to agree with my friends.
Right.
And like these are the kinds of conversations that I've had informally about video games my entire life. And I think that taught me subconsciously very early on that like there's obviously more than one right way to think about, look, or talk about a thing. And I think it's also informed a lot of like how I write too. I have a lot of respect for people with backgrounds in the academics, and a lot of like the crit that has formed my thinking about games has been informed by academia. But I know that for a lot of people, like academic writing chafes against like their sensibilities. There is a barrier there that a lot of people can't pierce through. And so I try to be like very conversational with my writing. Yeah. I think that's also like to the question that you were giving me at the start. Like I think a reason why I kind of balance how much of myself I put in versus like how much I like kind of finely tune the form and like find the middle ground there is because like I hear a lot of conversations in our circles where people will sometimes say that we're like writing for each other a lot, and I think that there is merit to that, and I think I think it's good that we write for each other. I think that we shouldn't forget that there are other people outside of each other that we're writing to and trying to have these conversations with. And I try and do that. And that kind of comes from the conversations I've had about video games with just like my best buds in a group chat every other day of my life. So.
And Moises, what I love so much about that and you talking to other people is that you're getting other perspectives that are making you a more well-rounded person, which make you a stronger critic. And that is so important, especially when we're in the video game space, which can totally feel like a bubble where we're all talking to each other all the time. So everybody, we are at the top of our hour here. So sorry we went a little bit over, but thank you so much again to my lovely panelists, a dream team of people. It was a delight to spend an hour with you. It flew by for me. Moises, Gio, Carolyn, please follow them all online. You've got the little tags here on your screen. And of course, thank you to the New York Video Game Critics Circle for hosting this discussion. It was absolutely such a blast for me. I hope you had fun too. Remember to donate at the link on your screen. And the next segment is, of course, getting cozy. This is what I like. This little post-lunch stream time, playing a little Tales of the Shire. Thank you all so much for watching this stream. And please enjoy the next one.
Give it up. Gundam!
Oh, the Gundam time. The reveal. The Gundam reveal.
Hey, I made this Gundam stream while watching the stream earlier.
Yes.
Enjoy my Gundam. That's my sign off. Goodbye.